come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. Almighty God, who in thy wisdom and goodness has appointed the office of rulers and parliament for the welfare of society and the just government of men, we beseech thee to behold with thy abundant favor us thy servants whom thou hast been pleased to call to the performance of important trust in these islands. Let thy blessing descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we may treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote thy honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of these islands and of those whose interests thou hast committed to our charge. And this we beg for Jesus Christ's sake. Amen. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen.
Morning, members. House is now in session. Yep, I'm ready.
Confirmation of minutes.
Members, the minutes of March the 3rd and March 6th have been circulated. Are there any amendments to either one? There are none. The minutes will be confirmed as printed.
Messages from the governor.
There are none.
Announcements by the speaker.
Members, we have informed of two of your members who have been absent today. Minister Tanae Furbert and MP Lister will be absent today.
Messages from the Senate.
There are none.
Papers and other communications to the House.
There are two papers this morning, both in the name of the Minister of Finance. I think the Deputy Premier is going to present them this morning.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Good
Go right
morning
ahead, sir.
to yourself. Good morning to the members of the legislature and the listening public. Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to attach and submit for the information of the Honorable House of Assembly, the Bermuda Public Accountability Board Annual Report for the year ending March 31st, 2022, as required by Section 14 of the Bermuda Public Accountability Act 2011.
Thank you. Next one.
May I continue,
Yes.
Mr. Speaker?
Continue.
Mr. Speaker, I have the honor to attach and submit for the information of the Honorable House of Assembly, the audited financial statements for the Bermuda Public Accountability Board.
The audited financial.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm sorry, the audited financial statements. I thought I was reading the same thing over again.
Sounds
That's why-
like you're getting out of saying real.
Yes.
No
My
problem.
apologies in advance,
quite all
Mr.
right.
Speaker. The audited financial statements for the Bermuda Public Accountability Board for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2022. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
No problem. Welcome.
Petitions.
There are none.
Statements by ministers and junior ministers.
Members, this morning, there are two statements this morning. The first is in the name of the Minister of National Security. Minister?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, colleagues.
Morning.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate the 31 participants who passed the Multi-Agency Gold Incident Command course, known as MAGIC for short. Mr. Speaker, the training took 4 days over the week of the 20th of February, 2023, and was presented by the UK's National Fire Chiefs Council and staff from the College of Policing, funded and facilitated by the Government House and the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. Mr. Speaker, the training was aimed at all departments and agencies that sit on the Emergency Measures Organization executive or work with the EMO executive. This included the Bermuda Police Service, Bermuda Fire and Rescue Service, Royal Bermuda Regiment, Bermuda Hospital, Bermuda Airport Authority, Department of Corrections, Department of the Environment and Natural Resources, Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Health, Ministry of National Security, and Government House. Mr. Speaker, these agencies and others will be included as responders to any major incident should it occur. This could be on land or on water. The incident could involve mass casualties or significant environmental damage, such as a vessel grounding on our reefs and spilling oil or other chemicals into our waters. Mr. Speaker, the training ensured that the participants have the confidence, understanding, and ability to perform the role of Girl Commander. This included planning, implementing, and reviewing a multi-agency strategy to ensure the timely resolution of a major incident or a civil emergency. The training challenged and tested the participants to further develop their performance by providing an opportunity for them to be able to, 1, define the roles and responsibilities of different agencies during a major incident or civil emergency. 2, take strategic goal command of a major incident or civil emergency. 3, plan, implement, and review civil contingency plans and multi-agency communication strategies. And 4, understand the legal framework of a civil emergency. Mr. Speaker, this training has strengthened our multi-agency incident command and control systems and ability to respond to an incident. In addition to the 31 participants who completed the training and are now certified Girl Commanders, a half-day training was provided to other individuals and agencies that work with the EMO. This half-day course provided them with a condensed module to develop their understanding of the role of Girl Commander in the event of a significant incident or civil emergency. Mr. Speaker, this training is yet another project that is part of our commitment at the Ministry of National Security to meet our mission of working together to keep you safe. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Members, the next statement this morning is in the name of the Minister of Economy and Labor. Minister?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Mr. Speaker, it is with great pleasure that I rise today to advise this honorable House that the Department of Immigration has made significant improvements to the timeliness for processing passports and work permits. Mr. Speaker, on June 23rd, 2022, I held a press conference to advise the general public of passport processing delays in particular. I am sure the members of this honorable House are well aware of the challenges BOTC citizens were having when applying for a passport, first time or to renew. In short, passports that should have been taken or published processing time of 11 weeks were on average taking in excess of 20 weeks. The delays by an additional 9 weeks or more has been preventing Bermudians and Bermudian residents from being able to leave the island for a vacation or undertake other major travel plans. This has caused much anxiety, especially when passport applications were submitted well in advance of the intended travel or allowed for processing of 11 weeks. Mr. Speaker, since early 2022, passport applications quadrupled and continue to increase throughout the summer. However, notwithstanding legacy applications which require additional documentation from applicants, I am pleased to report that the passport application process has returned to 11 weeks. It should be noted that in the last 5 months, the Bermuda Passport team, with the added assistance of students and vendors, have worked diligently to refine and return passports to the original processing time. In order to secure the necessary resources, the Department of Immigration enlisted 6 students who were registered with the Department of Workforce Development Summer Employment Plan program, of which approximately 3 students were assigned to passport processing. By early September 2022, 10 vendors were onboarded, 5 of whom were assigned to the passport process. the Bermuda Passport team continues to work to enhance the passport process so as to avoid returning to occurrences of undue delays in issuing passports. Mr. Speaker, the remaining 3 students and 5 vendors were assigned to work permit section to assist with the Black Law of work permit applications. They were assigned functional roles for vetting work permits, contacting employers for missing additional information, and printing and issue work permit documents. The work by the substantive staff, students, and vendors has paid off to the extent that the speed at which work permits are now being processed has been readily observed by employer associations and agencies alike. On February 23rd, 2023, the Board of Directors and members of the Bermuda Hotel Association issued a press release to the general public to express thanks for the timely processing and approvals of their annual work permit renewal submissions. The press release continued by emphasizing this is a positive step in assisting hotels in maintaining optimum service levels for both our local and international guests. Mr. Speaker, Expertise Limited, a major player in the recruitment arena, also expressed on behalf of its staff and clients the demonstrable improvement in the flow of work permit applications from submission to decision. In an email to the Chief Immigration Officer, they say the Bermuda employers that are our clients are very pleased. Please extend great thanks to your team. Other agencies have also commented on the improvements. Mr. Speaker, with the excellent achievements highlighted beforehand, the work of the Department of Immigration will continue so that in all areas of its remit, its level of customer service will begin to exceed the expectations of the general public on a more consistent basis. In the coming weeks, changes will be made to front-facing interactions with clients who attend the Department of Immigration to submit applications and/or to make inquiries. Mr. Speaker, although the human resource complement will remain the same, it is expected that more than one customer service window in the reception area will be open to serve customers. Also, a provision will be made for the collection of work permit documents on an express basis from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Monday to Friday. This means that employers who need to collect work permits will not be required to wait in long lines behind applicants who may be submitting more complicated applications. It is the hope that these small step changes will restore the lost confidence that the general public presently has in the department, rebuild business relationships, and address the needs of customers in a genuine and positive way. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Immigration team is excited about the future. I believe that their incitement and the changes that are on the horizon will be long-lasting and visible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Members, that's the last of the statements for this morning. We'll move on.
Reports of committees.
There are none.
Question period.
Question period. There are no written questions today. However, 2 members have indicated they have questions for the 2 statements this morning. The first, a statement by the Minister of National Security, MP Cannonier.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was having trouble getting it downloaded, but I finally did. The minister mentioned several folk who are in organizations who attended, and typically in the past, these events have involved local agencies, also like and declaring my interest, the fuel companies, because of the high risk that they propose or could be with them. Did you have any guest speakers there that came from any of these interest groups, like the fuel companies, who play a major role in the EMO?
Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In answer to the MP's question, I don't know everyone that was there, but it was wide ranging. I don't know if anybody in particular was from the fuel companies.
Supplementary? Okay. Thank you. Minister, that's the only question for you. We'll move on to the next statement. And Mr. Hayward, MP Pyramid would like to put a question to you.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Honorable Minister, for your statement to the Honorable House. You indicated in your statement that you are seeking to address delays in both passports and work permits. My first question is about passports. In the budget debate on Monday, you indicated that there is an 11-week processing period, or you hope to achieve an 11-week processing period on passports. Does your statement today mean that that 11-week processing period for passports will be shortened at all?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I indicated that processing times were at times exceeding 20 weeks. We had indicated to the general public that we wanted to process passports within the 11-week time frame. 11 weeks being the maximum time that we would want for a passport to be processed. That doesn't mean that every passport will take 11 weeks. Some passports are more complicated than others to process. Renewals are much easier than new Bermuda citizen passports, and as a result, they will have a shorter turnaround time than the 11 weeks.
Supplementary? Yes, MP Jackson?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. My question is, the passport applications that are in the process now and have been in the process for an extended period of time, I'm wondering if the minister might be able to provide any indication that some of these long processed passports will be expedited or given extra attention in order to get them through the process, and then he'll start his 11-week time frame.
Minister?
The statement wasn't a statement that we anticipate. The statement was a statement that we have been monitoring and observing the turnaround times, and we are meeting the 11-week turnaround time for all the documents that have generally been submitted. I did indicate that there are outlier documents or outlier submissions that may take longer than the 11th week, based off of the complexity of that particular application or the information that's required to process that application. But we have been monitoring that we have been processing passports within the 11-week time frame.
Supplementary?
Yes, please, Mr. Speaker. I'm just curious, with this new framework to expedite and be more efficient with passport applications, if there is a component of this program that communicates with the customer, with the applicant, so that the applicant can manage their expectation on when their particular application will be completed and their passport delivered. Thanks.
Minister?
In this current manual process, we do not give periodic updates as to where the passport is in the passport process. The aim is that when we move forward with automation and digitization of the process, persons will be able to track their particular applications. I did indicate in the statement that we were working to enhance the customer service experience and certainly the ability for persons to pick up their passports and work permits in a timely fashion.
Any further? No, the members used her two supplements. Do you have a supplementary?
I do
or-
not. I'm moving to my second
Second
question,
question,
please, Mr.
continue.
Speaker.
All right.
Minister, thank you for addressing the issue of seeking to get the 20-week period down to 11 weeks on passports. Turning now to the second part of your statement on work permits. Are these internal rearrangements going to truncate or lessen the period for work permits? And can you indicate what that period currently is and what you hope it to be?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I believed in the budget debate that the processing time period that is outlined in the budget book is 20 days. We aim to remain within that 20-day period for processing all documents. Again, a lot of the processing delays are based off of not receiving fully complete documents or awaiting information from various parties. And so generally speaking, renewals are well within the 20-week period, and for new work permits, we want to ensure that we meet that 20-day target. Sorry, not the 20-week, 20-day target.
Okay. Supplementary?
Yes, thank you. Supplementary. You've indicated that renewals tend to be, I think you said, well within the 20-day period. How about new applications for work permits?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I indicated that for all documents, we will want to have a maximum of 20 days in terms of processing times. And for renewals is much less than that 20-day period for actual processing. And so we want to ensure that we continuously provide efficient and effective service that allows persons to have the human capital that they require so that they can effectively execute their business.
Second sub or a new question?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Minister.
Oh, okay. That's it. There are no further questions for statements this morning. Thank you, members. We'll now move on.
Congratulatory and/or obituary speeches.
Does any member, let me just clear this. Does any member, Mr. Premier, you have your 3 minutes?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the first item, a traditional congrats and obits, and the second one, not so much, Mr. Speaker. The first one is that I'd wish to ask this honorable House to send a letter of congratulations to Mr. Rakeem Shields, who is the owner of one of Bermuda's newest restaurants, Bermuda Factory, the Factory, as it is called, or Factory BDA. I was pleased to attend a ribbon cutting ceremony yesterday at Ocean View, along with the honorable member for constituency number 30, Jason Wade, and also the honorable minister from constituency number 13, Minister Diallo Rabane. The factory is located at the Ocean View golf course. And not only does it have the tastiest foods on the island, but Mr. Shields, a young Black Bermudian who has experienced adverse circumstances in his life, but has managed to persevere despite those adverse circumstances, has also been intentional about empowering young Bermudian men and women and employing those young Bermudian men and women at this particular establishment. So the government is certainly proud to support his effort, and I'd ask that a letter of congratulations be sent to Rakeem, his part owner Daniel Woods, as well as their team of talented young Bermudian chefs, Keo Darrow, Jai Trott, and Akil Trott, Mr. Speaker. And I would ask that the entire House be associated with them, because I surely expect that all of us would support young Bermudians doing their thing and making their mark in this country. On the second note, Mr. Speaker, I'm not entirely certain if there is a letter of congratulations that could be sent from the House, as you would be sending letters for the rest of the year. But I would like to rise and to wish a happy International Women's Day to all of my honorable colleagues in this chamber, and certainly the women of Bermuda. Empowering women is not just a one-day celebration, but today serves an opportunity to reflect and renew our commitment to the continued fight for equality, respect, and opportunities for women everywhere. I had the pleasure of attending the International Women's Day event at Pier 6 this morning, along with a number of other honorable colleagues, to listen to a diverse panel discuss how true equality requires equitable action, and how persons can work in line with this year's theme to embrace equity as a community. And certainly, as we celebrate International Women's Day, I again pay tribute to all the incredible women in this honorable House, our senators, those persons who support the work of this honorable legislature, public officers throughout the public service, and also the women of Bermuda who we are celebrating this special day. And I want to take special time to mention the important women in my life, without question. My incredible wife, Kristen, who inspires me every day, my mother, Marilyn Burt, and of course, my daughter, Mia, who always reminds me to be humble. Thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Speaker.
thank you. Does any other member, Deputy Speaker?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to send condolences to the family of one of Bermuda's oldest citizens, Ms. Winnie Smith, who died at 106 years old, a resident of Claytown, Bailey's Bay. Ms. Smith, I can remember her probably had gone 100 or close to 100, catching that bus evenings to go and play bingo. She was very, very active, Mr. Speaker. Very nice lady, you know, and she certainly be sorely missed by her family. She's also the grandmother of former MP Renee Webb, and I know her daughter, Miss Vin Fox, and the rest of the family was surely miss her. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any other member who should make a contribution? MP Jackson, you have your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just like to be associated with the congratulatory remarks and recognition of International Women's Day. It's an important day for women. It's a chance for us to show our strength and to show our presence within the community. I certainly welcomed seeing all of the women that were of the public service that were out greeting those that were driving into Hamilton this morning, those that were up at Barnes Corner. It is reassuring to see so many women who are doing so much. And Mr. Speaker, I just want to always give that plea to the community, to government, to the House of Parliament, that our hashtag this year is Embrace Equity. And if we can all keep in mind that it is so important, as women in particular use all their courage to step up in a world of much adversity from so many different directions, that there is the support and the trust of members such as ourselves to be there so that women can have an opportunity to reach their goals and excel. And to listen to the panel of speakers at the International Women's Day breakfast that was hosted by the Women's Resource Center. Much congratulations to Elaine Butterfield and her team. It really spoke to the challenges and the strength of the people that are trying so hard to fight in a world of adversity. And so I would like to recognize everyone. All women, be strong, have courage, and we've got your back. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
MP, Minister Weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to also be associated with the remarks for International Women's Day, but in particular, Mr. Speaker, I would like to recognize some women that are in my various departments that come under the Ministry of National Security. Mr. Speaker, 2 of the 5 services within the ministry are led by women. The Commissioner of Corrections, Kiva Joe Benjamin, is the first woman to be the Commissioner of Corrections. It should be noted that 23% of the corrections staff are women, including a number holding senior officer posts. The Collector of Customs, Lucinda Pearman, leads the Customs Service, where 59% of uniform staff are women. At Customs, the majority of the senior staff are women. Of 3 assistant collectors, 1 is a woman, Shomet Porn. 5 of the 9 principal customs officers are women: Laverne Smith, Kelly Parent Chief Burgess, Donette Bell, Tanya Quinn, and Melody Lightborn. And the overwhelming majority of the 19 senior customs officers are women. 13 hold that rank. Some 30% of the officers of the Bermuda Police Services are women. Many hold in senior ranks in the service, including Ms. Naima Aswad, who is the acting deputy commissioner. 5 of the police's 20 current inspectors are women who are responsible for units of particular significance. Inspector Darika Burns is acting chief inspector of the Serious Crime Unit. Inspector Tracy Burgess is in charge of the training and recruitment division of the Bermuda Police Service. The tactical unit of the Bermuda Police Service comes under the leadership of Inspector Shakisha Miners. Inspector Karima Flood is attached to the Community Policing Division as the second in charge of the Central Division. Inspector Fiona Miller heads up the Court Liaison Unit. At the Royal Bermuda Regiment, the removal of conscription has seen an increase in the number of women joining the ranks of the Royal Bermuda Regiment, with 58 of the 308 troops being female. In the Bermuda Fire Service and Rescue Service, currently there are 21 female members of the Bermuda Fire and Rescue Service, with 13 of those being in the Emergency Dispatch Center. Mr. Speaker, also, I would like to recognize, just moving on, I'd like to recognize the essential work that women do in the Ministry of National Security to meet our mission of working together to keep you safe. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I want to recognize the Westgate Farm project provided by the Department of Corrections and taught by Mr. Christopher Faria. This is a fantastic initiative and yet another example of some of the positive developments coming from our correctional institutions.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister Ferbert, would you like to make your contribution?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also like to be associated with remarks regarding International Women's Day. Mr. Speaker, there's a song that I sung as young boy, all that I am and ever hope to be, I owe it all to them. I've got some very important women in my life, which I'd like to mention. That was my mother, who's 92 years old, my lovely wife, my daughter, everyone knows her, and my granddaughter, and my new boss, Siobhan Washington, who's in my life. These women have had a great impact in my life, positive and negative, and I appreciate them, every one of them. Mr. Speaker, I would like to send condolences to the family of Irma Smith from My Lord's Bay, Hamilton Parish. She died 90 plus years old. And Mr. Speaker, another young lady, Maria Dupont Burgess. And the reason why I mentioned this lady here is she passed away at roughly, I think it was yesterday or the day before, at 83 years old. Mr. Speaker, by say DuPont, one actually knows her nationality. Mr. Speaker, when I was, for 30 some years, I've been canvassing the lady in Hamilton Parish. And in 2012, as you all know, I ran for the Progressive Labour Party. I went to see her the day before. And it's true, Mr. Speaker, there is people that you may say will not vote for you. It's true. As I was leaving her house, she said, Mr. Ferbert, I'm supporting you. I'm supporting you. I said, why? Why are you supporting me? And she said, Mr. Ferbert, you've been there for me all my life. Mr. Speaker, I always tell my colleagues, and I tell this every member of parliament in this area, in this room, if you take care of people, they will take care of you. And this lady here has been a very important lady to me. I've taken her turkeys every year for 25, 30 years. And every Christmas she gave me Portuguese donuts, I think. I don't know what it is, but she gave it to me and I took it home. And of course I ate it. Well, this year, unfortunately, I took out turkey. She wasn't home, left it with her neighbor. And for the first time I didn't get my Portuguese donut. And I know why, because she was in the hospital. Mr. Speaker, I learned yesterday that she passed the day before, and my heart goes out to this lovely lady, Maria Dupont Burgess. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Witt, would you like your 3 minutes?
Thank you, Mr.
You're right
Speaker,
here.
and good morning to colleagues. Mr. Speaker, I would like for congratulations to go out to a group known as Women in Reinsurance. They recently held their Women's Day Gala and presented a Lifetime Achievement Award to Ms. Kathleen Ferris. And the reason why I mentioned this group, because they're a group of strong women, and one of them in particular is a guide and light in my life, and her name happens to be Nikisha B.J. Terrell. So I could not miss the opportunity of giving congratulations to them. And of course, if I have to mention strong women in my life, and not mention another woman in my life, Nikisha, that's Sheila Valeria Terrell, who obviously are a guide and light in my life as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? MP De Silva, you have your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise this morning as I would like to offer condolences and the House to offer condolences to a very good friend of mine's wife who passed away yesterday. And that is the wife of Mr. Millard Beach. His wife was named Julia Marie Beach. And associate Mr. Whip, Terrell, and the Deputy Speaker Burgess. They were married for 33 years, Mr. Speaker. She was an educator for most of her time here. She taught at Bermuda College, Salters, Berkeley, and she finished at the adult education facility where she was the administrator. So I know that she will be greatly missed by Millard. We call him Porky, Millard Porky Beach. It's a golfing term that he is very familiar with, and anyone that plays golf in the circles will know exactly what that means. So I certainly give condolences to Millard and, of course, all of his family. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP. Is there any other member who should make a contribution? MP Pearman, you have your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to be associated with the remarks of the Premier and my colleague Susan Jackson, MP, to celebrate International Women's Day today. As a grandson, a son, a brother of 3 sisters, a husband, and a father of 2 brilliant and very powerful daughters. I'm delighted to see that this is being recognized, although I agree with the Premier, it should really be every day. I'd also like to give a special shout out to the female colleagues here in the House and in the Senate who should be recognized today. The motto, as MP Jackson said, is to embrace equity. And I think we all can agree with that. And I certainly support that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? Opposition Leader?
Thank you. I'd like to associate myself with the comments made in regards to International Women's Day. I'd like to commend the organizers of the event that was held this morning, and in particular, the panelists, Christy R. Scott, Liana Nanang, Deshae Keynes, Kim Wilkinson, and they did a sterling job in regards to finding our sweet spot and not being afraid to jump off the cliff and make difficult decisions so that you can redefine your life and be living in purpose. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank
And
you.
I'd like to also send special congratulations to my supporter, my wife, Rochelle Simons, and to my adult daughters, Morgan and Erin. I wish them all the best on International Women's Day. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any other member wish to make a contribution at this time? There are none. We'll move on.
Matters of privilege,
There are none.
personal
There are
explanation.
none.
Notice of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance.
There are none.
Introduction of bills.
There's one government bill to be introduced this morning in the name of the Minister of Finance. Premier?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm introducing the following bill by its first reading so that it may be placed on the order paper for the next day meeting. And that is the Payroll Tax Amendment Act of 2023.
Thank you.
Opposition bills,
There are none.
private members' bills.
There are none.
Notice of motions,
There are none.
orders of the day.
Members, when all at their stage of starting today's proceedings for the debates on the estimates of revenues for this year's budget. And again, for our listening audience, there are 8 hours set aside for the daily debates on the budget. And during that period, the speaker is out of the chamber because we are in the Committee of Supply, and when we're in committee, the House is in the control of chairman under the panel of chairs. And this morning, we'll start with the Chairman, Lawrence Scott, in the chair. The first ministry up for debate this morning is the Ministry of Transportation. That's a 4-hour debate, and the remaining 4 hours of the 8 hours will be statistics, FA, and workforce. MP Scott, Chairman Scott.
Good morning, honorable members. We are now in the Committee of Supply for further consideration on the estimates of revenue and expenditures for the year 2023, 2024. Heads 48, 30, 34, and 35 are now to be debated. I call on the Premier to move.
We kind of did that out of order. So I'll just say I move that the House to now resume in Committee of Supply to consider the estimates of revenue and expenditure for fiscal year 2023, 2024.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Premier. Yep, now that we are officially in the Committee of Supply for further consideration of the estimates of revenue and expenditure for the year 2023, 2024, heads 48, 30, 34, and 35 are now to be debated. I call on the minister in charge to proceed. Minister, you have the floor. And this is a 4-hour debate. It is now starting at 10:40.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move the following heads: 48, Ministry of Transport Headquarters, 30, Marina Port, 34, Transport Control Department, and 35, Public Transportation, be now taken under consideration. Mr. Chair, we have, and the public, we have, as the chairman has said, we have a 4 hours debate. I'm going to do mine a little different. We're going to debate head by head, which will allow plenty of time for members if they want to ask any questions. I have no problem with the questions being answered for transport. And so we'll give members sufficient time, whether it's from the opposition or even from the government side that wants to ask any questions in particular. So we're going to look at head 48 at this time. So Mr. Chairman, today I'm pleased to present, and I'm glad to have the Permanent Secretary here today, and also the controller who controls all the money down at transport. So I'm glad to have them here this morning to help answer any questions if need be. Departments which come under the ministry's remit include, like I said, Ministry Headquarters, Head 48, Department of Marine Port Service, Head 30, Transport Control, TCD as we knew it, Head 34, and DPT, Department of Public Transportation, Head 35. In addition, the Ministry of Transport maintains oversight of the Bermuda Civil Aviation Authority, Bermuda Shipping and Maritime Authority, and Bermuda Airport Authority. The budget appropriation for the entire ministry totals $72,351,000, as found on page B196 of the estimates of revenue and expenditure for the year 23-24. Mr. Chairman, it is this ministry's headquarters which is responsible for transportation matters within Bermuda. The mission for the Ministry of Transport headquarters is simple: transporting people and goods efficiently and safely. Mr. Chairman, the Ministry of Transport strives to make transport an environment where job creation and entrepreneurship in the transportation industry are favorable. The importance of transportation in our community cannot be understated. The transportation enhances the reach of businesses and people to find relevant services, jobs, activities, goods, and productivity. It is vital for our tourism sector, for transporting visitors to the island and moving them around the island. In essence, the transport is the pillar which helps out tourism. Mr. Chairman, the Ministry of Transport headquarters Head 48, as I mentioned, includes 2 business units: an administration section and the transportation planning team. Expenditure overview. Mr. Chairman, we will turn our thoughts now to the total current expenditure for the Ministry of Transport headquarters Head 48, which is estimated to be $23,114,000 for the fiscal year 23-24. This represents an approximate decrease of $7 million, or roughly 23% over the prior year's budget of $30,054,000. The decrease is primarily due to the $6 million reduction in this year's budget of the Project Agreements Guarantee Minimum Regulated Revenue, or GMRR, which is normally paid to Skyport. The current GMRR amount included in the operating grant for the Bermuda Airport Authority is equal to $5 million. So we've gone from 11 to 5. That's where the $6 million decrease is. As I mentioned, and represents the estimate amount to be paid to the Bermuda Skyport Corporation Limited, shows Skyport actual regulated revenues fall below that of GMRR. The particulars of the calculation are set out in the project agreement. The remaining decrease of $1 million represents a reduction in the allocation of Air Service Department. In 2023-24, Air Service Development will be expanded to further position Bermuda for transformational change in the commercial aviation industry, aid economic recovery, and enhance the lives of Bermuda residents. The Air Service Development Committee, led by the Bermuda Airport Authority, will continue to work to expand current air service to protect our key gateway cities and enter and expand into new markets. So most people ask the question about MRG. That's where that funding comes from. So last year we had 4 million, and this year we've only budgeted for $3 million. The headquarters budget includes funding for the 2 business units mentioned previously, as well as the current account operational expenditure grants and contribution, as seen in the Ministry of Transport headquarters. Subjective analysis of current account estimates, grants and contributions. Budget line found on page B195 and 198, B198, and Schedule 1 for the grants and contribution of C19 of the budget book. Transport planning team had 48, call center 5801. Mr. Chairman, the transportation planning section fits with the Ministry of Transport headquarters, call center 58010, and is allocated a budget of $135,000, and it can be found on page B197 of the budget book. The transportation planning section oversees cruise contractual, operational, regulatory, and logistical matters to ensure the efficient integration of transportation service to meet expectations in Bermuda. In addition, this section spearheads various transportation projects and policy research initiatives deemed important by the ministry. Mr. Chairman, Bermuda was fortunate, very fortunate in 2022 that the COVID-19 pandemic rebounded faster than originally forecasted at 50% level. By early June, so in other words, last year when we did the budget for under the government and also the former Minister of Transport who sits as the chair right now, we budgeted for 50% levels of passengers coming in. June 22 ships were arriving with 76% occupancy level, despite the COVID-19 TA form that you guys want to put back in this year. And almost 100% towards mid to late season and on to November. 178 ships calls and approximately 292,477 passengers were originally forecasted in the ministry budget of 2022. Mr. Chairman, by way of some history, the 2022 cruise season did not start until April 4th, as Bermuda was still operating under COVID-19 regulations and never stopped. December rolled into 2023 season. Mr. Chairman, in 2022, the city of Hamilton, I know the member asked this question the other day to the Minister of Tourism, 11 cruise calls into the city of Hamilton and 12 actually came into St. George's last 22 budget year. Mr. Chairman, of the calls in 2022, 42 were Norwegian cruise lines, bringing 167,000 passengers, and 39% were Royal Caribbean Cruise Line, bringing 158,505 passengers. And together, our 2 contract partners brought 81% of the total passengers to Bermuda. Carnival Cruise Lines brought 15%, or 59,922 passengers, and Disney 3%, or 11,048 passengers, with 1% being other. After several cancellations and additions throughout the season, a total of 164 ships actually called into Bermuda, bringing 402,000 passengers. And we budgeted for 292 passengers, 1,000. And an economic benefit to Bermuda of approximately $167 million. This was a good year for Bermuda. Mr. Chairman, in 2023, our future looks very bright. Our 2 contract partners have confirmed 100% occupancy projections for Bermuda from April. We're at 100% already. These figures have increased since my pre-Christmas press conference and are based on new projections provided by the cruise line this month. This estimate includes 224 calls as printed in the cruise ship schedule at 90% capacity for 2023 season, allowing for cancellations, as we often have due to weather as you see today, or itinerary changes. Mr. Chairman, and this is the honorable member had asked the minister to us another day, the city of Hamilton is scheduled for 24 cruise calls this year, compared to, I mentioned, 11 last year. And the Thompson George is expected to receive 10 calls. Mr. Chairman, of the 224 calls listed cruise ship scheduled today, as of March 8th, 7 calls have already canceled due to bad weather. 1 for scheduling purposes and 6 for weather reasons. This is to be expected this time of year, but Bermuda has received 6 calls since the beginning of January, 2 of which have been inaugural calls for the Ada Bella on February 17th and Azamara on March 3rd. Mr. Chairman, the breakdown in the number of calls this season are estimated to be as follows. Royal Caribbean calls, 74 calls expected this year. Norwegian calls expected 101. Others will be Carnival calls 13. Disney calls 11. Other calls 25, which makes 224 calls estimated for this year, or budget for this year. Assuming everything goes well, as I said, the weather like we have today will cause cancellation. Mr. Chairman, in April, we go right into 6,000, 7,000, and 8,000 passengers days. April, October, and November will be our busiest months by the number of calls and number of passengers. And we will shift in June, July, and August, which are often softer months compared to the off-peak months. We can also see the business was shifted at the end of August and September, while our new brands now avoid Bermuda during Hurricane Ellie, as is commonly referred to in the industry, as I'm told. However, Bermuda will see more calls overall, making the ship calls, as I mentioned, more evenly spread out through the year in 2023. Just for the mention, but it's not uncommon, we have several days in April where there'll be more than 2 ships in port at the same time and with varying arrival and departure time. So there's no need for any special coordination. Mr. Chairman, Bermuda is scheduled to have 18 new inaugural calls in total, which is the highest number in recent history. These calls are ships arriving in Bermuda for the very first time, but it does not necessarily mean that these ships are brand new. But most are, and is typical celebrated with a plaque exchange between the host country and port and the vessel, which I did one last Friday. Mr. Chairman, I would like to ensure that my honorable colleagues and the listening public understand that even though this is a record year for Bermuda, there is no reason to be alarmed with the increased passenger projection. Sure, we will be very busy every day with ships in port almost every day, but the schedule is evenly spaced out. We do not have 2 5,000 passengers ships in port at the same time. Most days, as in previous years, and I can attest that I, along with my ministry team, have been meeting diligently with industry stakeholders and transportation providers to get us ready for the season. In 2023, Mr. Chairman, cruise ship revenue projections include $27 million, $300,000 in passenger tax, $7,700,000 in visitors fee, $11,800,000 in transport infrastructure tax, and $174 million spent by passengers and cruise spending, and $12 million in cruise line disbursements expenses daily locally for an estimated total of $233,000. Mr. Chairman, I think it's very important that colleagues should, I looked at it for a 11-year idea of where we were and where we are now. In 2012, we had 153 calls. In 2018, we had 180 calls. This year, we will have 224 calls. Mr. Chairman, the number of passengers for 2012, 378,000 passengers. In 2018, 484,000 passengers. This year, we have 622,000 passengers. Passenger spending in 2012 was $77 million. In 2018, 110 million. This year, 174 million is projected. The total economic impact to Bermuda, Mr. Chairman, in 2012 was 87.4 million. In 2017, 81 million. Mr. Chairman, in 2023, we are expecting a total economic impact of $233 million due to cruise ship. The Ministry of Transport escorted stakeholders from the West End Development Corporation, the City of Hamilton, the Corporation of St. George's, and the Bermuda Tourism Authority to meet with cruise line partners in Miami last month to discuss Bermuda as a destination, passenger guest satisfaction feedback, and our product offerings to ensure Bermuda was delivering on guest expectation. A lot was learned on the visit, and our stakeholders shared what guests can experience this season. New ideas were suggested by the cruise lines as to what their passengers are seeking to do, especially if in port more than one day. Examples include more beach options, high-end beach cabana products, daytime entertainment, more exciting tours outside of mainstream tours, especially for repeat guests, and more family-type attractions. Overall, great excitement remains about Bermuda's, but guest satisfaction scores did fall in 2022. No, you asked me why. It was something called, yes, it was that form that they had to fill out. They weren't happy with that. So that was part of the reason why it fell down. But mostly attributed to COVID-19 regulation and suggestions just spoken to for calls staying longer in Bermuda. Mr. Chairman, the 23-24 cruise ship schedule can be downloaded from the Department of Marine and Ports website, www.marineandports.bm. Cruise ship calls can change, so it is updated regularly. I'll be glad to take questions on the cruise line as we finish up 48. Excuse me. Administration head 48, cost center 4,800. With the Ministry of Transport headquarters, we'll have a budget of $22,979,000 this year. The bulk of the allocation is comprised of the Bermuda Airport Authority's operational grant of $14,400,000. There's a $5 million allocation to the GMMR, that's in case for Skyport, as mentioned prior, and there's $3 million allocated to air service development. And I've told you what air service development is all about. So we went from $4 to $3 million this year. The balance of the budget provides for the staff of the Ministry of Transport's headquarters. The total budget item is located on B197. Mr. Chairman, the Ministry of Transport's headquarters employs 4 full-time equivalent employees under the following cost centers: 3 persons, the ministry controller, an accountant, administrative office, an executive assistant, and transportation coordinator. Compensation is estimated at $410,000, 1.8% of the total budget. Revenue, the unfortunate invasion of the Ukraine in March, April 2022 by the Russian Federation resulted in the total loss of Bermuda civil aviation. $20-some million, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, you would recall that particular. Just wiped out, gone. And surplus revenue to be paid into the government of Bermuda. Since June of 2017, the authority has contributed in excess of $81 million $81 million in surplus revenue to the government, mainly because of those aircrafts coming out of Russia. The impact of this loss of revenue cannot be understated. As such, the ministry is working with the authorities to assess a sustainable model of business. I'd like to emphasize again, the ministry is working with the authorities to assess a sustainable model of business. We have got to find a way to break even in those departments. Mr. Chairman, I would like to discuss the year ahead with respect to the Bermuda Airport Authority. Mr. Chairman, the only authority which receives a grant from the Ministry of Transport is the Bermuda Airport Authority. The Airport Authority employs 47 full-time equivalent staff. The mostly Bermudian professional workforce have the mandate to provide essential retained government service as direct employees of the Airport Authority, thus enjoying a long-term job stability under the management of a local leadership team with a high-performance culture. Mr. Chairman, the Bermuda Airport Authority 6th fiscal year as a quango under the Ministry of Transport was the 2nd of March, 2023, 6 years. As you remember, they all came under the government before then. The current account expenditure can be seen in the Ministry of Transport headquarters. Subjective analysis of current account estimate located on B198, grants and contribution, located on page C19 of the budget book. And the mandate, Mr. Chairman, the Bermuda Airport Authorities delivers a range of essential air navigation services, also known as retained government services at the LF International Airport, including air traffic control, air traffic engineering, Bermuda public and aviation weather, aeronautical information, service and authorities, facilities, vehicles, and equipment maintenance. On behalf of the Governor of Bermuda, the Airport Authority, as owner of the airport, also oversees the performance of the airport developer and operator Bermuda Skyport Corporation Limited, and its 30-year concession to operate, 30-year concession maintain and develop the LF Wade International Airport. Oversight of Skyport includes one of the monitoring key performance indicators, such as compliance with standard airport operating procedures, international aviation regulations and building and equipment maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. The Airport Authority regulates the airport fees and charges charged by Skyport to airport users. These regulated revenues remain lower than projected due to the reduced frequency of commercial airline flights and lower passenger volumes in the most pandemic period. As a result, the Airport Authority remains contractually obligated under project agreement to fund a portion of Skyport's revenue shortfalls as determined by the GMRR. The GMRR took effect in 2020 due to the pandemic and impact on air arrivals. And I want everybody to hear this. The money that we've paid to Skyport since 2020 has been approximately $46 million. That's just on the GMMR, 46 million. Mr. Speaker, most people are not aware of this also, that we also pay money to upkeep the airport. The lights that are on at the airport is paid by the Bermuda government. We collect now 1 cent for tourists coming in on the aircraft. It's costing us roughly $20 million. $20 million a year. That's outside of the 46 that we pay for the GMMR. The Airport Authority, in coordination with the Bermuda Tourism Authority and Skyport, also leads Bermuda's air service development with a focus on. So most people are not aware of that. I wasn't aware of that until I got there. The interesting thing about it is that we had to put, as the Minister of National Security, I think it was the Minister of National Security, or maybe the Minister of Tourism mentioned about, we had to put some additional firemen down at the airport. It's costing us additional roughly $7 million a year for that. Yes, we had to pay for it. And we don't collect 1 cent. $20 million. I want to kind of get, makes people realize the challenge that we've had. Mr. Chairman, the 2023-24 capital project grant request for the Bermuda Airport Authority totals $1,800,000, which represents $200,000 or an approximate 11% decrease over prior fiscal year. These funds will be allocated to several ongoing key airport infrastructure and Federal Aviation Administration, but not limited to instrumental landing system replacement, aeronautical information services, aeronautical information manual, organizational transition, the latter being the official guide to basic flight information procedures in this regard, the acquisition of the IT infrastructure required for the International Certification of Authority as an air navigation service provider, Bermuda Weather Service, immigration e-gates for the new airport terminal building, air traffic control. It is anticipated that a number of these capital projects will be completed over a time span of 2 fiscal years. Mr. Chairman, I would like to thank the dedicated teams at the Ministry of Headquarters and the authorities under the ministry for their unwavering commitment to service during what will probably prove to be some of the most challenging years for Bermuda in recent history. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like now see whether the opposition want to have any questions on Head 48. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Is there anybody that would like to speak to Head 48? I recognize the Shadow Minister for Transport, Ms. Susan Jackson. You have the floor.
Yes, good morning, Chair. So I'd like to ask some questions. It's Head 48 on B197. So I just want to make it clear that there are basically 2 line items for this. So I'd like to start first with the general summary 4801, and this would be the transportation planning team, 58010. The minister gave us an overview of the cruise ship schedule for this year, and certainly it does sound promising. We've got a lot of people. I believe that the minister quoted an estimate of about 400,000 visitors to our islands via cruise ships. And my questions will really center around how we're going to manage the ground transportation once the visitors arrive on the cruise ship. As we are all very much aware, the passengers like to get off the ship and immediately walk around Dockyard, but then they want to go further afield to the beaches and to see the sights. And I have lived in Dockyard for years, and so I have certainly watched how the public transportation is organized at Dockyard, but I would venture to say we were probably looking at about half the number of visitors when I was living there versus 400,000 that we're anticipating this year. So my question to the minister is, what is being done, and if we might be able to get an overview of at least the general concept of how the ground transportation will be organized in Dockyard this year. I remember that there was a time when we had public buses giving large tours throughout the island. So I'm curious whether we are organizing or considering large groups of visitors being able to be transported throughout the island using dedicated public transportation, or whether the public transportation department will be having conversations with the public service vehicle owners, such as the minibuses and the taxis, to see how the arrangement and the scheduling and the meeting of demand will be carried out for those members, so that they have an understanding and are ready to meet the demand of visitors that want to leave Dockyard by motor transportation. The minister also mentioned that there will be times to be seeing a number of cruise ships in the Great Sound up in Dockyard at the same time. And I believe I heard the minister say that the cruise ships arriving, let's say there would be 3 of the cruise ships, that the scheduling of them will be such that they're not all in the harbor at the same time. However, the demands on the ground transportation and how there is communication and preparation for ground transportation, given the fact that if we have approximately, hopefully we can have a full complement of taxi drivers, as an example, we're talking 600 taxis for what could be 24,000 guests, right? So how are we going to manage that with taxi owners driving already 16 hours a day? They also have to accommodate all the rest of the island. How is the ministry going to be able to meet the needs of this larger amount of visitors coming to the island, and that it will roll over right after the other? So very little downtime before the public transportation, whether it's the minibus drivers, whether it's the taxi drivers, are all going to have to come back and work again. So it'll be like triple shift, I would imagine, for a number of these visits. And so whether we are taking that into consideration and working with the public service vehicle owners to coordinate that so that it is a healthy option, not only for the ground transportation, but for the cruise passengers. And of course, I have to mention the fact that whether we have public service vehicles such as taxis, minibuses, the quadricycles, if we have all hands on deck at Dockyard, we still have a number of cruise ship passengers who want to get on our public buses. And that has caused a major issue for our general public who want to get from the West End into Hamilton. And the problem, which has persisted for years, has been that the tourists, the visitors, will get on the bus in Dockyard. The bus is completely full before it even leaves Dockyard. And then from Bose Island east, anybody who's trying to get to work, anyone who uses the public transportation, in particular buses, to move about the island from about 9 o'clock, 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, after the cruise ship passengers have had their breakfast, we can't get on a bus. And so people who are trying to make time, who are trying to get to caregiving for the elderly, to get the elderly up out of bed and fed and ready for their day, these caregivers and the rest are not able to get on the buses, and they have to watch 2 and 3 buses go by until the volume of tourists have passed through. Now, I do understand that in the past there was some doubling up of buses that would leave Dockyard. So one full bus of tourists and sort of a half-empty second bus would come along. But that still throws off the schedule for the Bermudian resident who is using the public transportation, in particular the buses, as their main form of transportation, and it is thrown off for them because of the high volume of visitors. So my concern, and if the minister can give us any indication or comfort that the residents of Bermuda will still be able to, one, expect that the bus is going to be there when the bus schedule says it's going to be there, and that they will be able to get on board and either have a seat or stand up in order to get to their destination. My other question around cruise ships, and I'm still on the general summary on page B197, 4801, line item 58010, Transportation Planning Team. I wanted to ask a question. It's just a little question, but how does the ministry calculate and have a contingency for the number of cruise ships that do have to cancel because of weather. And we anticipate this every year. And of course, yesterday was just a real example of the reality that we face, that the weather can change in a very short period of time, and cruise ships that are scheduled to come here divert and head to other destinations. And there must be a cost factor in that, because the government will always give this beautiful, encouraging number of millions of dollars that we are forecasting to earn. And of course, these numbers are not printed in the budget book. These are estimated numbers. So really, I guess if the minister, these numbers can come out of anywhere. So my question to the minister is, what is the loss when the cruise ships are canceled, in particular because of weather? And do we factor those cancellations and that loss of revenue into our numbers? And how does the transportation planning team manage that so that we are able to maybe recoup those numbers, because we know, so that there's a bit, is there a redundancy kind of plan on the side in order to recoup those numbers? Because otherwise, I guess the ministry could say, we're going to have 5,000 cruise ships coming to Bermuda, but 4,999 of them canceled. So I just want to have some indication of how the ministry actually calculates in cancellations and how that is adjusted within the total estimated amount that is expected to be revenue generated from the cruise ships. My other question is, when a cruise ship is canceled, does the cruise ship still have to pay all of the fees that the cruise ship in general is expected to pay? So, or do we receive?
A point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Point of order. What's your point of order, member?
The Honorable Member Jackson seems to be just replying to his brief without referring to any numbers, anything whatsoever. It seems to be just a free fall. I was just wondering if we could have some order to it.
Member, she did refer to line item 4801, which is administration, and which is the transportation planning team, which is responsible for all the topics that she's speaking on right now.
Thank you, Chair. And it's 58010 Transportation Planning Team, and it's on B197. And if I just may make a comment, please. The Transportation Planning Team is a section within Head 48 of the Ministry of Transportation. There are no line items under this very important, super significant, huge revenue generating section of the Ministry of Transportation, and all of the costs are estimated costs. So until the government in general is prepared to develop the cruise ship line items, then I, as a shadow, have to ask questions in a vague and undetermined way. All right, so I'm going to continue with my questions.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. No, she cannot do that. The rules are you speak to line items and you speak to sections in the budget book. You can't say, well, until you do this, I'm going to speak to whatever I want. That's not true, and it shouldn't be allowed.
So I will stay on line item 58010, Transportation Planning Team on B197. And I'll ask my final question around that, and that is, are ships obligated to fulfill their fees that are anticipated or expected to be paid to the Bermuda government when they're canceled because of weather? So do we have a contingency in there for that? And then how are we adjusting estimated amounts for things like passenger tax, wharfage fees, docking fees, dockyard maintenance, how are those things recalculated? Or does the cruise ship pay those taxes anyway, even when they don't come to Bermuda because of a cancellation, let's say due to weather? And maybe a supplementary question on that is, does Bermuda have any kind of insurance around that? I mean, if there is some sort of cancellation, I don't know, is there some form in my same way that we would get insurance for windstorm? I don't know. I'm just asking. So with that, now I have one other question about the cruise ships. You had mentioned cruise ships coming to Bermuda, and you had the minister had mentioned Carnival and Disney. And I was wondering if the minister might be able to give an indication of the sort of star rating of the ships, the cruise ships that come to Bermuda. And I certainly know that in the hotels, you can sort of get anything from a 2-star hotel, which may be a basic bed and your basic amenities, to a 5-star hotel, which can have your own private pool and a butler and the rest of it. So I'm just curious in general whether there is a scaling of cruise ships, and if the minister might be able to give us a general idea of the sort of quality star rating of the ships that come to Bermuda, because that's rarely spoken about. And although we talk about how cruise ship passengers come on island, and it's estimated that they may pay, $262 per passenger per day or something to that effect, whether that is adjusted really based on, or if it's an average of all the ships, because maybe there are some ships that come to Bermuda that are more in the 2-star, 3-star rating, and others may be in the 4 or 5-star rating, and we just kind of average it out. For the ground transportation, for businesses on the ground, for the economy here in Bermuda, I'm sure that the answer to this question would be useful, because if we know that we're going to have a number of, let's say, cruise ships that are, more middle of the road, economically feasible cruise ships then we know that the cruise ship passengers may not be as interested in paying for maybe some of the luxuries and souvenirs that are in the area, versus a 4 or 5-star cruise ship that may be generating more revenue on island, and whether the grounds, whether there's some indication that there are differences in the spending power of passengers that are arriving in Bermuda, generally speaking. I'd now like to move over to C19, grants and contributions. Oh, actually, did the minister want to do this sort of cruise ship by cruise ship, or the whole thing? Okay.
This was supposed to be the minister indicated at the start of his debate that it was head for head, meaning that anything that comes under head 48, Ministry of Transport headquarters, which would be the administration or the regulatory and policy.
Thank you. I'd just like to take a moment to go over to C19, which is grants and contributions. And this is listed as line item 7099, the Bermuda Airport Authority. And this also falls under head 48 as listed on page B198, grants and contributions, with an estimated $22,400,000, which is down $7 million from last year, from 22-23. And this is the grant for the Bermuda Airport Authority. So I just have a couple of questions. And of course, energy prices are probably the highest on everybody's minds right now, from the single family home to large structures. And if the minister might be able to give us an update on how that solar park at the Finger was supposed to work. I don't know, but I thought that at one point the solar park was going to, even though it had to feed the electricity maybe to Belco. And I don't know if the Bermuda Airport Authority pays the energy for the airport. I'm just, if the minister might give us an update on the solar park and how that works with the Bermuda Airport Authority, and whether there is some arrangement there, because the high cost of energy is certainly something that we can have control over. And so everything we can do should be done to negotiate our energy prices down, especially for such a large building as the airport. I'm also curious, as far as the sort of air service development, which falls under the Bermuda Airport Authority, which is a part of the grants and contributions through Head 48 Ministry of Transportation. I'm just interested in finding out a little bit more about associated costs. So, certainly we are appreciative as a nation for the ministry being able to reintroduce the JetBlue direct flight to Boston. That is much appreciated, but I'm just curious if the minister might be able to let us know whether there were any costs associated with that, how a successful negotiation of a deal like that occurs. Now, I understand there are certain things that have to be kept confidential, but as taxpayers, I believe that we would like very much to get some indication of whether that cost us anything to get that Boston direct flight by JetBlue back in action for us year round. And if the minister might also be able to give us an indication under air service development, all part of the grant to the Bermuda Airport Authority, whether the minister might be able to give us an indication of how involved the Bermuda Airport Authority is a part of the negotiation with airlines around gateway cities and terminals. So it's one thing to have the conversation about getting an aircraft to fly direct, or to fly from one place to another. And now I'm going to sort of flip over, just using British Airways as an example. Does the Bermuda Airport Authority get involved in the negotiations around whether the British Airways flight is going to fly into Heathrow versus whether it's going to fly into Gatwick, and whether the Bermuda Airport Authority has any part of the negotiation on what terminals within those airports the Bermuda, I'm using the example of British Airways, flight flies in. So even though we may try to promote the advantages of a particular terminal and a particular gateway city, and there are always positives because Bermuda is an island and we have to get where we've got to go. But I'm just curious whether we have to make any kind of compromise, or if we have absolutely no control over what gateway cities and what terminals and what airports the airlines choose to fly between Bermuda and the particular gateway city. And another question that I have under air service development is the question around the members of the team. Certainly, the Ministry of Transportation representatives, as well as the Bermuda Airport Authority, are well known as being part of the negotiation team to work with the airlines to make sure that we have confirmed airlift. but I'm curious whether the hoteliers or representatives for the hotels, and also any of the Bermuda Tourism Authority representatives are also active members in the negotiation team, or are they just maybe consulted or something? I would just like to get some idea of the composition of the negotiation team and how that is structured, so that it can, hopefully develop from strength to strength, and we can continue to get the results that we're getting. And again, I congratulate if the ministry for the direct Boston flight coming back, but we still have a long way to go. We still need to see about Miami. We still have, many other markets to explore and hopefully confirm. And at that level, when we get to that, even further afield, I'm curious whether we still engage with professional consultants to help us with the negotiation for air service development. And I am aware that in the past, certainly even reading past briefs for the budget, that we have engaged consultants to help us to navigate through the negotiations with airlines. And I'm curious whether we have a consultant on hand now. If we don't, if the minister might be able to give us an indication of whether this is something that is part of a future plan, so that we have the best and the strongest team of representatives negotiating on Bermuda's behalf for the best air service that we can possibly get. The minister had mentioned a little bit, and I'm still on C-19 grants 7099 Bermuda Airport Authority and their air service development. So I'm still in that space. The minister had mentioned that the Bermuda Airport Authority had to undergo some infrastructure reviews, the FAA, making sure that we have all of the infrastructure in place to meet the demands of those that are supervising and managing our air service. And last year, there were some questions about some ongoing multi-year projects, but I was just wondering if the minister can give us an update on, in particular, things like the instrument landing system. There was an IT infrastructure certification, AIS or AIM, and whether we were able to transition as an air navigation service provider. And there was also some equipment upgrades for the weather service, and wondering what the progress was, or whether these projects have been completed and are now all paid for and taken care of. And with that, I would like to take my seat for a few, as I am aware there are other members with questions under this head. Thank you.
Thank you, member. Are there any other members that have questions or that would like to speak to Head 48 under the Ministry of Transport? All right, you have the floor, member.
Yeah, thank you, and good morning, colleagues, and to Bermuda. On B197, under the priorities and objectives, I was just curious I'll go down to the bottom of the page, sorry, on B197 under Administration 4801, under Administration 58000, and of course, actually, let me put my glasses on here, 58010 Transportation and Planning Team. I understand under Transportation and Planning Team, nothing has changed as far as the allotment and the allocation of fees. But I was just wondering, in listening to the minister's general statement as he was alluding, that he gave a hint to me that I guess what I'm asking is in the negotiations with cruise ships, I understand that we don't charge fees for the period, the winter period, because it's kind of like a promotion trying to get that going. And I kind of like the idea that between the months of maybe November, I don't know the exact months. I think it's November, but the cruises probably end. The cruise ships probably end in October or November, some period. So between that November and the March period, because we know cruise ships then kick up in April. I was just curious as to whether or not we're going to extend that, not just for this year, but for the following year of this promotion, that during the winter months we do not charge these fees, which I think is a good idea to get awareness and the likes of coming here during the winter months. Whether that is a plan going forward as the headquarters and the minister negotiates with the cruise lines. Also, the minister under also the planning 58010 and administration, he mentioned about there will be 24 calls for Hamilton in his statement, and also in St. George's 10 calls. I was just curious as to how many of those might be during those winter months that we talked about, that we will not be receiving fees. The other thing that I was curious about, we know that the cruise ships actually, they're loaded. By the time they get to Bermuda, they still have quite a bit of inventory on their ships. So other than the fees that we attain from the cruise ships, do the cruise lines themselves purchase any other type items in bulk from Bermuda? It could, I don't know, it could be a food item, it could even be some fuel, I don't know. But I was just curious as to whether there is anything else that they purchase from the island when they get here as a resource. Now, some of the lines, I just said where it is. I just explained where that was. He said it in his statement, so I got to refer to his general statement. So, yeah, I wasn't in that ministry. So, yeah. Well, all our times are coming. We all got time. I'm sure yours is limited too. Yeah. That's right. You keep chirping. Your former finance minister got a whole lot to say about you. Your team.
Member, it might be
We've got a lot of interpolation going here.
Yeah, but the
Not necessary.
but you're now you're
Don't blame me. His
allowing the
talking.
interpolations to take you off of your
I'm going to my
train.
next point.
So if you can just
I'm
head
going
to your
my
next point, then.
Absolutely. Call everybody in check, Chairman. Okay, so I'm going to go over, some of the lines are blurred, of course, because you have the communication between headquarters and communication with WEDCO for transportation. And I understand that transportation, they used to have a transportation expert up at WEDCO. I don't know if that is still the same case. So it seems as if, I don't remember the gentleman's name, but they did have a transportation guy up there to help them with the movements of cruise ship people and the likes there. So I was curious about was if we go over to, I'm trying to find it, let me get the page here in the back. Yeah, these lines are kind of blurred with marine and ports, so I don't want to go into marine and ports necessarily.
If you're looking in the back, what you can speak to is on C19 under Ministry of Transport. That would be what you are allowed to speak to at this time, because that would be what's under Head 48.
Yeah, but it goes into public transportation, and I think I'll wait till we get to that part. So the initial questions is understanding a little better how is the communication for the headquarters and all of the interest groups like the ferries and like, for instance, the bus service. How is that working as we ramp up all of these cruise ship calls? We know that we've had problems in the past. And if I look at some of the other allocations of acquisitions, we are going to be buying ferries and all these other things. But how now, that's not going to be into effect until a couple of months from now. April is here next month. How is that going to affect the communications and making sure that we can handle all of these cruise ships?
Thank you, member. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to Head 48? Honorable Member Jackson, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'd like to just turn, well, I want Head 48, Ministry of Transport Headquarters, and under that is the Bermuda Civil Aviation Authority. And if I need a line item, I'll go to B198, Revenue Summary 8108, Civil Aviation Receipts. So in 21-22, the budget book shows that we got over $20.5 million in revenue from the Bermuda Civil Aviation Authority. I'm going to refer to that as the BCAA. It's estimated 22-23 that there has been a difference of 17 million lost, not coming, no revenue. So I just wanted to ask the minister a couple of questions about the BCAA's future and where we are and how we're going to get to the next step. So my question to the minister is, how many planes did we ever get back? Did we ever get back any of the planes that were in Russia? And I believe in the beginning, I can't even remember, but I know we were talking like there were 770 odd planes on the register that were sort of leased. Many of those, maybe like, I don't know, 600 or so of those were actually leased to entities within Russia. So these planes were in Russia, flying about Russia. And once the sanctions were dropped on Russia because of the Ukraine war, we could not get, we being Bermuda as the register of these planes, as well as the leasing companies that actually own the planes, that we couldn't get the planes out of Russia. So did we get any of the planes out of Russia? Because it's like that conversation went very silent. And so I'm just curious whether any of the planes were ever allowed out of Russia or taken back from Russia. And with regard to the leasing companies, and again, it's been almost a year since we've really had this conversation about the BCAA's airplane registry, but it was my understanding that the airplanes themselves are owned by leasing companies. And just to give a distinction, in the news or wherever, I sort of got the indication that many of these leasing companies are in places like Ireland and places far away from Russia. So they own these planes and then they lease them out, just like rent a car, rent a cycle, they rent a plane. And they would lease their planes oftentimes to Russia. And Russia has, or the minister is going to inform us in a bit, but I believe that we have not heard that Russia has given back any of the planes. So technically we might have 600 planes that are on the Bermuda register or were on the Bermuda register that are stuck in Russia. They're lost maybe forever. And so my question is, do we have any legal obligation to these leasing companies? Are we, as a Bermuda jurisdiction, and I am of the understanding and that the leasing companies and the popularity of the Bermuda airplane registry is that Bermuda is a very stable, strong jurisdiction. And so if there are any legal claims that these leasing companies may one day take to court, file in court to get their planes back or to get the value of their planes, I don't know. But if any claim were to be submitted, would these claims come to Bermuda's courts, which could be quite a, I don't know if burden is the right word, but I would imagine it would be a fulsome calendar for the judicial system to handle if all of a sudden we've got legal cases claiming suit between Irish leasing companies and Russian aircraft clients. So, what's the update on that? Are we now going to have to prepare for any legal ramifications of the sanctions? And my other question around the Russian air bits is, what are we doing to see whether we can build the registry back up again? So, we want this to be a hopeful end story for the Bermuda Civil Airport Authority. And there has been a year with what, according to line item 8108 on B198, is showing that there hasn't been any real revenue generated, and whatever revenue would have been given to the consolidated fund is not coming, with a $17,800,000 difference quoted in the budget book. So where do we go from here? And if the minister might be able to give us some indication of what the future looks like for the BCAA. Are we going to diversify? Are there new markets out there for us to explore? Are there different kinds of planes that we can get on the registry? I don't know enough about the intricacies of the Aviation Authority to know, but if the minister might be able to give us some indication, because certainly the Premier in his budget statement, as well as within the news, has certainly raised this as a concern. And there are a number of people, staff, there's a team that works at the Civil Aviation Authority, and I'm sure that they too would like some indication of what the future may look like. So if the minister might be able to provide some indication of any consultation or planning that has gone into the next steps for the Civil Aviation Authority, I'm sure that that would be of interest to the listening public who are keeping a tab on what's happening with the sanctions with against the Russian country and the planes that are now in Russia and no longer part of the standard that Bermuda maintains for its planes on its registry. And I am just going to briefly touch on the Shipping and Maritime Authority. They come under head 48 on page B197, the Ministry of Transportation Headquarters. I hadn't seen a particular line item for them, but the Shipping and Maritime Authority, I would imagine, has faced by no means the same scale of loss as the Bermuda Civil Aviation has with planes in Russia. But I would imagine that we have had some, maybe the minister can confirm for us whether there were any Russian registered yachts on our, or ships on our shipping registry, and whether there has been any damage to the yeah, I know, any damage to the prosperity of the Shipping and Maritime Authority, and whether they too are having to look in other directions or pivot their strategy in order to maintain a lucrative model for our shipping and maritime registers. I'll take my seat at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Jackson. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to Head 48 under the Ministry of Transport? MP De Silva, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question or two. The honorable member, Susan Jackson, spiked my questionable things that I had in mind. And I will continue to speak to head 48 on page B 197. I found it interesting that the honorable member spoke about revenues. And what I'd like to ask the minister is, can he confirm what effect the electricity bill down the airport has had on our revenues? Because at last count, I think it was costing the country about $3 million a year. So if he could clarify what that annual bill is to the taxpayers of this country. Yes, of course. Yes, and of course, I would also like the honorable minister to tell us how much we've paid in minimum revenue guarantees since the airport opened. Another great brainchild move of the OBA as they then ahead, bulldozed ahead with the creation of a new airport. Thank you.
Thank you, MP De Silva. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to Head 48, Ministry of Transport, on page B 197? Keep in mind that this is a 4-hour debate, and we have gone. It started at 10:40. It's now 11:52, and we're just on the first head. MP Wade, I see you in the back there.
Thank you. I know it may sound to be repetitious, but I believe the minister said under head 48B 198, I believe the minister said we were talking about almost $3 million in electricity. So I guess my question is a little different. What can be done and what is being done to try to amend this contract so the people of Bermuda can benefit from the money that we're paying over $3 million in terms of electricity? I'm sure me, like most other people, you get up and you click that button to see what your electricity bill, and most of the time you're in shock and concerned about what you're paying. This is nothing in comparison to what we're paying based on a contract that was apparently badly written and bad terms and unfair terms to Bermuda government to Al F. Wade and at Al F. Wade International Airport. So if the minister can let me know what can be done for us to get out of this part of this very badly written contract. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Wade. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to Head 48, Ministry of Transport Headquarters, found on pages B 196 to B 199? MP Jackson, you have the floor.
Thank you. I just have one other question. When we were talking about the revenue guarantee for the airport, I was just curious. There is a breaking, a sort of a break point when we will have enough passengers on aircraft to provide enough revenue to make sure that our bills are paid. And understandably, COVID was a fluke for the whole world. And, you know, if anybody's got to apologize, yes, I'm sure across the board, any human being can say that they faced some consequence as a result of COVID-19. I'm putting that out there. It happens. But there's got to be a point at which we're no longer dragging our feet. And we are a resilient community. And so I ask the minister, how many more visitors do we need to get into airplanes where we are up and running again and we do not have to worry about consequences that were felt from COVID? And that was a consequence of COVID.
Point of order, Mr.
I
Chairman.
want to know.
Point of, member, point of order. Go ahead. What's your point of order?
The honorable members asking the minister, what point do we have to get where we don't have to pay X, Y, Z? We have revenues coming in. The honorable member was proud of the government that helped support and form the agreement that we now have to live by.
MP Jackson,
I
you have the
agree with
floor.
my colleagues, that wasn't a point of order. But my question again is, we have had to start with airlift to Bermuda with very few passengers on it. We had to deal with the travel authorization form, which was cumbersome and frustrating and expensive. And then we had to deal with certification of vaccination certificates. I get it. People were not flying, but people are flying again in full force. And so I would like to know from the minister, how is Bermuda spreading its wings to attract visitors back to Bermuda so that our airplanes are healthy, filled with people, visitors wanting to come to Bermuda again from gateway cities where we can start with the low hanging fruit from gateway cities that are popular. When are we, and at what percentage level do our plane capacities need to be in order for us to really be back in a above the line, healthy airlift journey? And if the minister might be able to give us some indication of where we are and where we need to be. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Jackson. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to Head 48, Ministry of Transport Headquarters, found on pages being 196 to 199 in the budget book? With there nobody else being indicating, Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I love this idea because it allows individuals to ask questions for the public to get a more understanding of whether the revenue or expenses. So I welcome all the questions that have been put forward by my colleagues and also by the opposition. Let me answer that first question, the last question that my good friend, Mrs. Jackson. As an accountant, we always try to match. If you're in business, you try to match these revenue with expenses. And what we're saying is that we are paying out roughly $20 million in expenses for the airport right now. So if we are calling ourselves the Bermuda Airport Authority, which actually runs, has kind of oversight of the airport, but it's the taxpayer that pays that money out. But we receive not 1 cent from that particular expenditure item. So whether we have 100 million, 20 million people arriving through the airport to match the revenue with expenditure, we will never have that ability until we actually able to get the revenue from that generating that expense that causes. So any business who's running, whether it's my simple coffee shop I used to have, if someone was to have taken my I don't know, coffee shop.
Minister, you have the floor. Stay focused.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that if I only had expenses and no revenue coming in for that, it was going out to somebody else, the retail store next door, we could never have made any money. So you're just paying out money. And all I'm saying is the government's been continually paying out money in this particular operation. And we'll do it for 30 years until we actually are able to, if we are able to get it back one way or the other. We will never be able to, no matter how many people comes in, to break. So it's running right now, we're running at a loss. The country, the taxpayer are running a loss because there's no revenue matching with the expenditure. So we have a lot of questions, and let me see if I can answer. Some questions I'll be able to answer. Some I probably have already forgotten because there were so many questions. And if the honorable members, if I do not answer, I have no problem with you writing it down, and I'll see whether I can get the answers to you. Let's start with the ground transportation up there with so many people coming in. The honorable member mentioned, I think it was 400,000 passengers coming in the dockyard. I mentioned this year we have roughly 622,000. So it's 200,000 more than last year. So we have a challenge. And so I have been meeting with many of the stakeholders, whether it's a minibus group, whether it's taxi drivers, whether it's with Skyport, whether it's hotels, we're gonna have some challenge. And so how we're trying to counteract that, I think I made a statement not long ago that we have roughly 81 taxi drivers. At that time, I don't know the exact number right now, that were not actually licensed for this year. And that's mainly because of whether it's probate or some other means or one other reasons. And then we have, as I said, there are taxi drivers that actually operate for, that work for other, whether it's government departments or private organizations, firemen, or policemen, TCD, works engineering, and the list goes on and on. And the cars, unfortunately, is parked up. So we do have some challenges. How do we counteract that? Well, like I said, we've been meeting with the taxi drivers and we've been meeting with minibus operators. We met with Skyport, and I'm using Skyport as an example. You've heard the time when people were coming in through the airport and there's no taxis. We're trying to encourage individuals, and the taxi drivers are listening to me, and others listen to me, of how do we find a way to benefit the drivers down there and benefit the tourists that are coming in. You have, I use that concept and you can visualize it. There's certain times during the day, particularly that maybe morning, afternoon, I say planes are dropping out of the sky or they're landing at a certain time when there are hundreds of tourists coming in. So I've had discussions with Skyport on how they have what we have down there, what we call shared ride concept. And we normally don't use that, or they don't normally say we, because we don't actually are not down there anymore. There was a time when we had traffic officers down there, but now Skyport has their own traffic officers. When we could share rides, and they normally share rides at the end. By that time, people are still waiting. So we're using the idea of encouraging Skyport and hopefully taxi drivers to pick them up. So if I land, I'm able to share a ride with the opposition. You know, myself as an individual, and I say, listen, Ms. Jackson, let's share a ride to Hamilton Princess, for example. So a ride to Hamilton Princess normally for one individual is about $32, roughly $32 right now to go by taxi. And so the taxi driver makes $32. However, if we share ride, Ms. Jackson, MP Jackson, between $25, so she saves $7. I will save $7, but the taxi drivers make $50. So there's some real benefit for all parties. All right, so there are some things we're discussing to make that work. I've got to be meeting Skyport very soon again to make sure we find how do we do this. There a line that says zone, because by zone. Zone 1, you get in this line, zone 2, zone 3. Now, you do not have to share a ride with me, Ms. Jackson. You can say, I'm going to my own taxi, and a taxi driver does not have to take shared ride. It's up to them. If they want to lose 32, 50 minus 32, quickly $18, $18, then it's more beneficial. Now, it's not by myself, Ms. Jackson, and Mr. Pearman. It'll be just two groups, okay? We're not sharing that type of concept. So we're allowing that concept to take place and then trying to encourage it. That shared ride concept is already at the airport. We're just trying to put it in action and encourage individuals to use it. Like I said, I will be meeting with Skyport to try to make that happen. But at the dockyard, how do we move passengers? There has to be better coordination. So we'll be meeting with sometime soon the chairman of VETCO and his team of how do we coordinate better. There's some discussion within our team at the ministry of how can we do things better. We've had discussions with Myers and other groups of how they see things happening, which I think is coming along. Will we have challenges? We're going to have some challenges. There's never a chance in life that there's no challenge in life. I don't know how perfect it is. There's always some type of challenge. Most people get off the cruise line and they try to go to head down to Horseshoe Bay, for instance. And so we have these shuttles going back and forward, back and forward. Unfortunately, sometimes minibuses will stay there instead of going back to dockyard. So we're going to try to find a way to encourage, make that happen. We're going to now have a traffic officer at Horseshoe Bay, which we never had, right? To encourage them to get back up dockyard, back and forward. You had mentioned the idea of, and that's very much concern for me, we have heard where Somerset residents have not been able to get on to buses because people go by. If you know where the buses park up in that area, is not right into dockyard. So what's going to happen is that in the early morning runs, they're going to come out and go straight into town. They're not going into dockyard per se to pick up any passengers. The whole idea is to, because early morning runs, whatever it is, from H9, we want to make sure it's clear for residents of Somerset to have a clear ride. Now, will there be some times when it's overflow? Possible, but that's up to the director to continually monitor that concept and see how we can improve the game as we go along. And then when that's done, then they'll go into dockyard to help to move some of the passengers to Horseshoe Bay, and then this goes on and on. So these are things that we're working on. We're also having discussions with, you may be aware of there are community buses out there. There's AT, they call them AT, airport taxis, which consist of minibuses and whatever. We may expand their horizon to allow them to do other things where minibuses are being done right now, to give them and also help to increase the lift of people coming out of dockyard. We haven't, like I said, we're having discussions. We're not fully there yet, but hopefully we can encourage and get that movement going. So yes, we know there's a challenge coming. We're working on those challenges. Will it be perfect? I can guarantee it will not. I will be up there. I plan to spend the first day when they come in April, and that's when the whole idea of this large group started to come in April. I plan to spend the whole day up there observing, and then see how we can make some adjustment. I'll see whether the PS and other people will be willing to go up there during the day. And of course, Stacey Evans may have some lunch up there at the expense of Ms. Washington, and get some things done. But it's a whole day of how do we monitor, view these things, and make these things happen. So that's how the local movement from dockyard, and there's other things we're having discussions with the taxi drivers. We're not quite there yet. I'm having discussions within my cabinet colleagues to get support from them on certain things. And until we get everything nailed down, I'm not willing yet to go public on those particular items. The colleague, the other member, I think, I'm not sure it was you or whether it was MP Kennedy had mentioned about loss of revenue. So we do not charge, the schedule runs from April to October, where we get passenger tax. I mentioned passenger tax and infrastructure tax. And thanks to MP Zane De Silva. When MP Zane De Silva was Minister of Transport, he was the one that encouraged infrastructure tax. And it's been very successful that we collect these funds from the cruise line, and it helps to with our infrastructure, whether it's ferries, whether it's other things. As you know, we have some money in the budget this year to improve our things at Marine and Port, fixing of ferries, and the whole list goes on. So 2019 was the first time we had infrastructure tax. That was $5.1 million under the Honorable Member Zane De Silva. We're now collecting, which we hope to collect $11.8 million this year. So there's some benefits that the cruise line and the Ministry of Transport are working hand in hand. Of course, they charge the passenger, right? And the passenger pays for all these type of things. And if I remember, it's $15. I'm taking a guess now. $25 for passenger tax. But I think it's $15. I could be sent. I sent to be corrected. $15 for infrastructure tax. I sent to be corrected on that one, but I'll confirm it because we collect $27.3 million on passenger. Now let me just say this to you: You asked about how we're going to hope to collect it. As every budget or every accountant understands, is that we go through the idea of how many passengers coming, roughly. We budget for a conservative number of either of ships number coming in or whatever it is. And so we're budgeting at between 85 and 90% of passengers. We're not budgeting at 100%. We budget at 100%. We'll get more than the number. And we hope that the whole numbers come in, then there's a lot more money that will come in between passenger tax and also for infrastructure tax. So we hope that works. But as I said last year, the minister budgeted for 50% of passengers because we had the COVID situation, but we came in at 72%. So it's nice to budget conservatively. Any minister of finance, anybody who's doing finance would budget under expectation and hope the best would work out. And if you do those type of things, whether law firm or accounting firms or restaurants, they budget for a lower number, and if it comes up higher, and then the stock market goes crazy, because you got a higher return than you anticipated. So that's why we budget at 90%, and but when the ships are not being charged passenger tax between November and March, and this is something that we're encouraging. I believe the OBA had the same things, what we call regular calls and occasional calls, right? So occasional calls for during the time when the OBA was in government, that was 25, 26, 36, and 44, and 61 in 2017. We'll have 130 occasional calls this year, right? So you guys had it during the time, and that's when we have that this is a time when, in that numbers are when they'll come in, and they come, and I'm sure at that time they got the same benefits that we have in place right now. So this is not new for not charging passenger tax, or about that time you guys didn't have infrastructure tax, but it wasn't. That's when, so we didn't charge it. Well, what do we do receive? And I was just, so here's some interesting stuff. So there is something in there called cruise ship port expenses. So cruise ship port expenses was $7.5 million in 2012. It was $9 million in 2018, and now $12.4 million this year. And here are some of the things that are being charged to the cruise ships. Removal of gray water, black water, or garbage. Of course, they've got to move that, so there's a charge for that. Wharfage fees are being charged. So I believe Dockyard, okay, Hamilton, or whether the docks up in the Dockyard, they'll get some wharfage fees. Port fees, agency fees are Myers and that group. Stephen Doris may get some fees. Tender service, we do tender. We charge them for tender, fresh water, tugs, customs fees if need be. We charge them for customs overtime, port dues, pilotage, line boat, dockage, line handling, dock master fees, and spare parts, stamps, fuel. And so there are other charges. There are charges that that they still have to pay. But like I said, does not come into being when it comes to passenger tax, which goes directly to the consolidated fund, or the transport infrastructure fund, which also goes to the consolidated fund. But the visitors fee goes to BTA. Now, that wasn't in place when the OBA was in government. We put that in place in 2019, and that came about, if you recall, Mr. Chairman, that they dug, I call it a trench, but what do you call it from a a channel. They dug the channel, and they borrowed RCI borrowed, I think it was $14 million to dig the channel. And when the PLP became a government, we were looking to raise passenger tax, and they said, "Oh no, we have this liability concern, which they charge the visitors cabin, was called visitors cabin tax. They used to charge the visitors." I said to them, "Okay, well, fine, that works. What we can do is take the debt. I think roughly at the time it was roughly $6 or $7 million, and put it on the BTA books." So that money went on that debt went on the BTA books, and then we said, "Okay, how we gonna pay for it?" So we BTA, the government, encouraged them to continue to pay that fee, visitors fee, to BTA, right? So they'll get roughly, if everything goes well, a 7.7. Oh, there was somebody saying no. They'll get roughly $7.7 million. Now we've underestimated. I think we're budgeted. I think those guys were budgeted $6 million for BTA. I mean, I'm not sure the minister confirmed that number. So if they get over there, it's well. So that's how it works in regards to expenses. Sometimes cruise lines are charged, and other times they are not charged. Let me see if I can answer some other questions here. BCA, how much time do we have left?
You have roughly 13 minutes until lunch.
Okay. Let me see if I can answer. Yeah, somebody confirmed it's $25 for transport infrastructure tax. The questions, I have a whole bunch of them here. BCAA. Yeah, BCAA. It was interesting that when I was the minister in 1995 for transport, I met with Boris Yeltsin's son-in-law and Boeing, chairman of Boeing, and that's how the Russian aircraft came on the registry at that time. Now there were hundreds of them, hundreds of them. What's?
Remember, you're speaking to the PLP's budget.
Yeah, but I'm just telling you how the aircraft, the funds came into the system. So the whole idea, and so I understand how the whole idea of the revenue came place. I was very much involved in negotiating with waiting for that to happen. So we received over the year, over the time, millions of dollars in regards to the fee coming from BCAA. Now, well, that was not because of the party, it was because of another person. So the whole idea was and so the benefit to BCAA has been significant. And should they have or been how can I say? I'm trying to be a little wise here. Diversify. Let me use the word diversify. That's the word I should use. Diversify over time, and they have to a certain extent. How proactive they were is questionable. Because when you're receiving a lot of money from, you don't have to wake up nights and or daytime and figure out where your money's coming from. It's just flowing of milk and honey. And it's no different from any family. Your money's coming in from rents and et cetera, and then all of a sudden, the rent goes crazy, or you lose the property, and you say, "Well, where money comes?" So you got to now be creative on how you're going to get money in. So the whole idea of BCAA, and you see no line item in there. We're not giving them any money this year. We're not giving any money to Bermuda Shipping Marine, because at the end of the day, our mandate is to ensure that those two operations at least break even one way or the other. Right? That's the efficiency part of it. How do we work to encourage them? And so we'll work with them over the next 2 or 3 months to find a way to break even with those two groups. Let me see, we've got these questions here. You had asked a question, cruise ships plane team, how does the ministry calculate cruise calculation? I think I answered that question already. Yeah, I think I answered that question. Do council cruise ships still pay the fees? No, the answer is no. If it's canceled, no. You just don't pay. I don't know who asked the question. So if you don't come in, you don't come in. And that's why we take a conservative number on numbers that may not take it. Because if we assume that everybody was coming in, that will be too, just don't budget like that. Does Bermuda have insurance for loss of revenue or council calls? No. No, well, that's a good question. I guess you can ask us. Are there ratings of cruise ships? It probably is. It's on Google somewhere. We don't go on Google. I'm a great cruiser. I've done 29 cruises, and my cruise line is Royal Caribbean. I love Royal Caribbean. I know. Yeah, but I'm just saying, personally, my family and we do our RC quite often. Air Service Development, what are the associated contracts regarding? So we don't give out that information. As you know, we don't. It's no part is ever disclosed a minimum revenue guarantees. No. Now, you as a former minister in that department for the party, you would know.
Point of clarification.
Minister, are you willing to accept a point of clarification?
Thanks. Then can you confirm, because as I was listening to the brief, that I thought I'd heard that under the Bermuda Airport Authority, $3 million had been budgeted and put aside for the airlines?
Oh, so if that's the question, yes, we set aside $3 million. Well, we don't say how that $3 million is given. I would tell you, despite what the Royal Gazette said, we spent $1,500 to make a trip up to JetBlue, and now JetBlue is coming. So the money that we receive from JetBlue is significantly higher than the $1,500 that the Royal Gazette was complaining about on the front page with myself and the team going, which consisted of BTA, which consisted of the Bermuda Airport Authority. We had the Hotel Association with us. We do have advisors, you call them consultants, which BAA has, and also Skyport has advisors when it comes to not cruise line, but airlines. So we both have it, and so it worked out well. And we met with American Airlines last week, talking about the Miami flight. Unfortunately, they will not be flying to Bermuda this summer. They stop in May, and they will probably refly again in, I think, 5 months later. Now, that's a challenge. Our airlines are getting full, and there's a challenge to us. So we're having discussions with them on how do we get a bigger flight, a larger aircraft coming out of Charlotte, right? Because the seating capacity and the former minister may help me out. I'm not a pilot, but I think it was about 100 and for the smaller aircrafts, 120. I don't know. Yeah.
The average aircraft that comes to Bermuda seats 150 passengers.
50. And so we're asking for larger ones. And I not believe, but we have a meeting, I think this week or next week. Talk to them about how can we get a larger aircraft out of Charlotte. And we're having discussions also with other airlines on how do we get some more aircrafts here. And so if anything happens, that's where part of the $3 million, if need be, right? For years we've had, when we first came out of Miami, on Dr. Hugh Braun, who first brought the American out of Miami, there was a minimum revenue guarantee there. And all countries pay something, right, from time to time. Now, but we don't reveal what airlines get. But $3 million. But so last year we had $4 million. We're going down to $3 million. That tells you that things could either get better or be found some different ways of negotiating different things. Right. So that worked out in the country's favor.
5 minutes until lunch.
Okay. I think I answered that question already. You asked for the hotels or BTA active members. I just answered that questions regarding the solar part. I'm glad you asked the question. So the solar part was put in place by the OBA. You remember that, right? Yeah, well, they put it in place. And so that does not go to Skyport, nor does it go to BAA. It goes directly through a transformer right to Belco. So the government gets nothing out of that. So, but we pay roughly $3 million a year on electricity. Yeah, the lights on the airport. You go by and say, I am paying for that. Well, you negotiated the wrong thing. The OBA unfortunately negotiated the wrong thing. We pay we drive by, when you drive by the airport, and you say, I'm paying for that I'm paying for those lights, and we collect not $1 or 1 cent in revenue. How in the world did we do that? The $20 million roughly that we pay right now a year is the same amount that we was paying when we had the old airport roughly a year. But the revenue came to the government, passing the revenue tax. We used to get money, but now we get nothing. And now we're paying out money, and anything that BAA is responsible for, the lights and the aeronauticals and everything else that runs on the runway, that's what we're paying for. You know, it's amazing how we got involved in such a crazy deal. And this government is always continuing to find ways to look at ways to how we can make that happen. But I want every Bermudan drive by, coming from St. George's, and just point at the airport every morning and say, or nighttime, matter of fact, it's on morning times too, I'm paying for those lights. I'm paying for this light. Not even the new airport, the old airport also. The old airport. I'm paying for those lights. Keep on saying it. I'm paying for those lights. And you can blame only one person. How much time do you have left, Mr.?
You have 3 minutes.
Trying to, a lot of these questions I've already answered. Let's see. What is the communication with headquarters and all the other agencies to ensure we can handle the cruise passenger? Well, I kind of answered already. Transportation coordinator, we will be working with that, with Red Code, see how we can do it even better. How many planes did we get back during the lease? Who's we? Because BCA never earns. We don't earn those planes. So they belong to lessors. So we had leased them. We may still have a few on the books that we're looking at it, of monitoring them. I'm not sure. But we don't actually own it. We don't own any planes. The Bermuda Shipping Registry, I think you had asked about airplane Russians on that. There may have been a few, but that impact on BCA was not as great. Matter of fact, it was insignificant compared to the aircraft registry. Let me see, one more minute. And BA, yes, they have a marketing team now. I saw some of them here recently, and I think it was in Malaysia, knocking on doors. So they're out there trying to knock on doors, but it's not easy because some of these aircraft registries have authorities have been there for years, and so they're trying to find another marketing way to get these aircraft here. Hence why the government said, we're not giving you a cent, BCA, we're not giving you a cent, BSM. We're now going to find a way to break even going forward.
And you have timed that perfectly, Minister. If I think Deputy Leader, if you can take us to lunch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do move that we adjourn for lunch until 2 p.m.
There's a motion that we move to lunch. Is there any objection? If there no objection, we go to lunch.